Welcome to the second episode of the Punch Plan podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a bunch of different topics. So let's start with the lightweight division being on fire with the recent fights.
Yeah, there's tons of action happening in the lightweight division, which is super exciting to see. Obviously Lopez fought Kambosos, which Lopez probably isn't going to be a contender at lightweight anymore because he's probably going to move up. But Kambosos, the new undisputed champ, that's going to be super interesting.
Yeah, it's super cool to see that Kambosos is now the lightweight champion, because now he's been going to all these different events recently. He was at Haney versus Diaz.
He's doing a lot of media.
He was at Tank versus Cruz. Yeah, he's trying to promote his name, which is very smart. He's trying to get his name out there and become a huge star, which is what you're supposed to do. So good on him, and we'll see if he can keep the belts against some tough competition.
Yeah, he's definitely at the top. He beat the man who beat the man. Obviously Lopez beat Loma, and then Kambosos beat Lopez. So he's been at the top. He's been promoting himself great and advertising, going through tons of different media and tons of different places. So it's cool to see him. It's a breath of fresh air. Obviously, the country of Australia getting a huge representative in Kambosos. So that's super exciting. Haney versus Diaz as well. That was an exciting 12-rounder with Haney obviously coming out on top, but it was competitive. There were moments in the fight where Diaz was having success. There were rounds that he was winning. A lot of people tend to think whenever there's a close fight, a lot of people, there's going to be a bunch of people who are going to say it's a robbery or say this or that. And I was seeing people say that Haney versus Diaz was a robbery, which personally did not see that at all, because I thought Devin Haney was winning a majority of the rounds, and obviously Devin Haney wasn't perfect in there, but he was winning rounds, and he was definitely beating Jojo Diaz in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. Haney was doing good, sticking to his different techniques. He had good snap to his punches. Like you said, it was competitive, and Diaz had success in some moments, but I think Haney did enough did what it takes to get the win.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of criticism with Devin Haney, saying, "Oh, he's a pillow fist."
Yeah.
"Oh, he's chinny," but though he might not have as much power, his technique and everything, he's super good technical fighter, which I feel like people should give him more props for that, even though obviously he has stuff to work on and he's still not perfect and he has some holes in his game that he could improve on, but he's still a tough fighter in that lightweight division, and him versus Kambosos would be a really good fight.
Yeah, that would be amazing for undisputed, and also just to clear that division of the debate of the WBC giving Haney the belt, even though it was technically Loma's, but there's a ton of controversy there. But obviously Kambosos is technically undisputed. I mean, he has all the belts if you count the franchise belt as the WBC belt, which I don't know. There's a lot of debate there of if he's undisputed or if he has to fight Haney to become undisputed. But other than that, that fight itself is just super interesting because we have Kambosos who's hella tough. He has tons of different attributes and tons of different skills that he possesses, and so does Haney. He has that pop to his punches, not necessarily the power to hurt some of these guys at the top level, but still, he has a lot of technique. He has a good Philly shell. He's a smart boxer, and he'll just outpoint people. But it was interesting to see Kambosos kind of outbox Tio, which was surprising. I don't think anyone really saw that coming, but it happened. So we'll see if Kambosos could do the same to Haney, or if Haney can outpoint him like he did against Diaz.
Yeah, and I feel like over this weekend, all these top young guys at the lightweight division were fighting it out against some good opponent, but not the top of the top, I would say, the most elite guys in this division. So
yeah.
Now hopefully they got past all the challenges, also with Loma if he beats Comey this coming up weekend, and then hopefully we'll see them clash with the top of the top guys that just won their last fights. So maybe Haney versus Kambosos. We'll see what happens with Tank, who just won versus Cruz this weekend as well on Sunday, and he didn't put on his best performance. He still looked good.
Yeah, definitely not.
He was during the fight. It was reported that he got hurt, his hand was hurt. So
yeah.
You also put that into a tribute, but it wasn't his best performance for sure. But I was also impressed with Cruz, how tough he was. He just kept pushing forward.
It seemed like Cruz had the perfect game plan. He had that tight guard. He had that the perfect counter to what Gervonta bring. it kind of seemed like Gervonta was kind of relying on that uppercut a lot, but he wasn't really able to land flush with it because Cruz's defense was so tight, and he wasn't letting, Gervonta have any success in the pocket and even outside the pocket. Tank was running for a majority of the rounds while Cruz was hunting him down. Obviously, at the beginning, maybe when Tank was fresh, he was more active, and he was, also he didn't have a hurt hand reportedly. So, it's interesting. Also, like, there's talk between Shakur Stevenson moving to lightweight, which would also be insane. Like that just proves like the lightweight division is the future of boxing.
Such a prospect.
All these guys in this division, just imagine like a Shakur Stevenson fighting like a Lomachenko. Like that would be unreal. Like that would be such a good fight. I don't even know who would win that. Like it's tough to say because there's two like both like highly skilled guys, and that would definitely be an interesting fight. Obviously, we have Loma fighting Comey next week, so we're gonna see how he does. That's gonna be another great fight, and the lightweight division is just on fire. This is definitely the future. Obviously, of course, we have Ryan Garcia as well. Like what I find so interesting is these guys are so young and they have so much potential. And
they have so much room to grow and just to get better and better just add more tools to their skill set.
And definitely one of these guys can leave like a lasting legacy and become a superstar.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of these guys have like a lot of fans. Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, they have fan bases, but they're not superstars necessarily. But if they keep winning, if they build up, obviously Tank under the Floyd Mayweather banner. So there's that.
One more thing about Tank that I feel like even he was like disappointed in his own performance. Like you could definitely tell at the post-fight interview. I think mainly it was just kind of shocked because he thought he was gonna do him like he's done everyone else in the past. I think he thought he was gonna do Cruz like he did the last Cruz, and uppercut him into oblivion. But it didn't happen, and Cruz fought back, and it was relatively a competitive fight. So
it was a very close fight. I think most people either had that as a draw, maybe in favor of Tank a little bit. But obviously, again, as I spoke about, a lot of people are going to see it as a robbery, especially if you dislike Tank or, the boxing it's very subjective in how you score rounds. So, people could have had even Kambosos losing the fight against Lopez. It was a split decision. Obviously, that could have been hometown bias. It could have been whatever it is. Obviously, boxing's boxing. Judging is pretty much like, it's corrupted in a lot of ways. So, it's interesting. It's hard to score rounds, but just the potential of these guys, how young they are. Gervonta Davis, 27 years old. Devin Haney, 23. Lopez, 23. Ryan Garcia, 23. Like, these guys have so much potential. And Lomachenko, he's a bit older, but he's such a veteran in the game. He's so talented, so gifted, and I could definitely see him rising to the top of the division pretty soon.
Yeah, I think personally that he's going to reclaim all the belts and reign that division for some time until one of these young guys build up the skill set a bit more, and then I could see them being like very competitive fights with Loma. But he has so many tools at his disposal, and he's just such a well-rounded fighter with so much experience.
For sure.
All those amateur fights, all those high-level competition pro fights.
Two Olympic gold medals.
Yeah, so, it's crazy how achieved he is.
Impressive.
It's crazy how achieved he is, both amateur and even pro-wise. So. He really needs to put on a statement versus Comey, and if he does, then we could see him going for the belts again and trying to reign the division once again.
Yeah, and it seems to me like a lot of these guys are pretty raw. Haney obviously he doesn't seem to have that power, but he has that pop and he has that skills. But none of these guys are perfect. Haney still has many flaws. Tank of course also has flaws. Lopez we just saw has flaws against Kambosos. All these guys they're decently raw. They haven't really built up their skill sets. Obviously, Teofimo Lopez beat Lomachenko, but, styles make fights, as you know, and Lomachenko seemed to have started a bit too late in that fight.
Yeah.
So, it's still interesting. I think Lomachenko probably has the best tools and the most, well-rounded tools out of anyone, but, yeah.
Yeah, like a fight, a rematch of Loma versus Tio would be so interesting, but I doubt it's gonna happen since, Tio really seems like, Tio really seems like he's gonna move up, and even in the post-fight interview, he was hinting at it a lot, and especially if he struggles that much to make the weight.
Then and Lomachenko, he was a small 135 pounder. He fought at 126 and then 130. He's a 3-division world champion, so. he's not huge for the division. He's small. So it was an interesting fight. Obviously, we had someone who's huge for the division who was barely able to make weight against Kambosos. Obviously, he said that was a struggle, but
Yeah.
it's interesting how this division is turning out to be the future.
Yeah. And another one of those fighters we were talking about, Devin Haney, who a lot of people are showing comparisons to Floyd Mayweather, especially since how young Devin Haney is, and people are calling him the next version of Pretty Boy Floyd Mayweather. So, what do you think about all those people making those comparisons?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Obviously, Devin's super young. It's hard to say because at that point in Floyd's career, he was still knocking people out. He had like a huge array of people that he was knocking out at that time. So it's interesting because Devin Haney isn't necessarily knocking these people out, but he's outpointing and he's beating these good technicians. Jojo Diaz is no slouch. He's a very tough competitor. He's been in there with guys like Tevin Farmer, Gary Russell, Allen Jr. These guys that are super tough. Obviously Fortuna, who he outpointed and outboxed. So yeah, I think Jojo didn't get the credit he deserved for that Devin Haney fight, but yeah, Devin Haney made it look pretty seamless. But he still has flaws. He's still pretty raw. He's not perfect in any means. There's a few things in that fight which could have caught someone's eye and been like, it's a bit suspicious.
Yeah, like we said, like Devin has a ton of room to grow, but his skill set's already for where he's at, and the experience he has is pretty good, and he's able to outpoint a lot of these guys really well, and he has a beautiful jab and everything.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
he's an amazing fighter, and we'll see how he builds up his skill set. So that's why like the fight versus Kambosos would be super interesting and like an exciting matchup. So we have this guy who just beat T.O., which seemed like a monster at that division, and is versus Haney, who's up and comer, and this would this be his toughest fight?
Which one? Against Kambosos?
Kambosos,
yeah. For sure. I mean, Kambosos probably doesn't have like the threat of the power, even though he did drop T.O. I feel like that was more of like a timed shot, and it wasn't really like a power shot. It was kind of like a flash knockdown. So I don't know if either of them really have the power to hurt each other. It'd probably go the distance, I'd say.
Yeah.
But it would definitely be a good fight, and probably Haney's toughest fight, especially from what we've seen Kambosos do to Teofimo Lopez.
It's interesting for Kambosos because he had such a good performance, but it's kind of hard to see him like just the ways that he kind of matches up against these top guys at lightweight, since all of them have such a different skill set, and they're also like raw, like we said. So it's just interesting to see how when the fights actually happen, it's gonna be interesting to see if Kambosos will be able to defend and just hold down the fort pretty much at lightweight.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be very interesting because Kambosos, it doesn't seem like he has the best style to keep that undisputed spot. I feel like someone might take it from him, but it might just be, me not seeing enough of Kambosos, me not seeing all of his fights, of course. I only really saw him against Lopez, which, I mean, he did well, but obviously we saw flaws. We saw him get dropped later on in the fight. But, from what we saw, he was doing well, and he was outboxing Teofimo Lopez, which was nuts. I think Devin Haney, he's an amazing boxer. He has a great jab. He really flicks that out there, and he outpoints people with it. He kind of like steals around in that, and that kind of reminds me more reminiscent of the Money Mayweather era rather than the Pretty Boy era, because at the end of Floyd Mayweather's career, he was kind of outpointing everyone. He wasn't necessarily hurting these guys like Oscar De La Hoya, the Manny Pacquiaos of the world, and he was outpointing them and winning by decisions. So that's what kind of Devin Haney reminds me of more than a Pretty Boy Floyd, who was a younger version of Floyd, who was really hurting guys and putting it on him.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened to Floyd. He kind of hurt his hands. Obviously, later on in his career, he had hand problems and hand injuries. So, he kind of played it safe and just became a very technical, very smart fighter. He already was, but
it just leveled
he
up.
was just outpointing those guys. Yeah, leveled up for sure.
Yeah, and he just became such a defensive master. And also, I feel like something that's a bit underrated on Haney is his defense. He has pretty good defense. He gets caught sometimes when he's a bit careless and he decides to come in the pocket and just go in for guys.
Yeah, and I find that interesting that he comes in, because you wouldn't expect him to.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem like he's the kind of fighter to come in on guys like example like Jorge Linares. When he got caught by Linares, he was hunting him down, and I was watching that like. It's very interesting to see Haney walk down these guys that are bigger punchers than him. You'd expect, obviously, maybe not Jojo. Jojo probably wasn't a bigger puncher than him. Jojo,
Yeah.
he was a 130 pounder, so it's hard to say he was a bigger puncher. But there were times where both of those guys were exchanging, and none of them were seemed to take too much damage in that fight. But it was a great fight. Haney did well. He showed his skills. He showed his skill set, and I think he proved a lot in that fight. I think he would do well against Kambosos. Probably win that fight in my opinion.
Yeah,
don't get too heated in the comments with that one.
Yeah, I think it would be a really good fight. Probably also a competitive fight, but I think Haney might edge it. Yeah, I think Haney would edge it.
Yeah, it's definitely tough to say. I mean, I've only seen one fight of Kambosos, so it's kind of like, it's tough for me to call since I've seen multiple fights of Devin Haney and I've only seen one fight of Kambosos. So, yeah, it would definitely be a great competitive fight and very interesting. Obviously, Kambosos is undisputed right now. And if that fight happened in Australia, that would be huge. It'd be definitely...
That would be insane.
Yeah, that would be a big mega fight. And we got to make these fights happen, man. These undefeated guys, both of them. I mean, we just had Kambosos versus Tio, which was good. But at that time, we didn't even think Kambosos was all that. We thought Lopez was just going to go through the guy like it was nothing. But ended up, Kambosos is now the new top dog. But we need to see these guys fight. The Ryan Garcias, the Kambosos, the Haneys, Gervonta Davis is.
Yeah, that's why it's also just so cool to see like a new star like that being born, because no one expected him to beat Tio. No, like pretty much no one, since Tio beat Loma and everything was going in for him, and then Kambosos just came and just stole the show, and now him just getting all this media and everything is doing great for his name and how he was at all the fights. And one of the fights he was at was the Gervonta Davis fight.
Yeah, Gervonta Davis was fighting Isaac Cruz in a fight very recently. So that was an interesting fight. It's interesting to see where Tank will go with his career, whether he'll be a superstar, whether he'll kind of. It's interesting because he is under that Mayweather banner, and it seems like he's kind of like trapped in like that Mayweather promotion where he's not able to go out and fight like a Ryan Garcia or one of those guys who are not with PBC or not with Mayweather promotions.
Because Floyd, right after the fight said publicly that Tank's gonna stay loyal to the banner kind of, and he won't be fighting anyone out of PBC.
Stay as an in-house fighter. That's directly from his quote. So,
I don't see why.
Kind of sucks to see that because he has so much potential, so much. He's so much skills. He's huge power. Obviously he didn't really get to showcase that against Isaac Cruz, but in all of his other fights, I mean, man, if you look at his knockouts, if you look at the way he breaks people down, and he could box too. He's not just a puncher. He could box, he can move, he can do it. He can do a lot. So he's a 3-weight world champ, but belts are relatively easier to get in boxing than most sports, especially because. If you get one belt, there's still like 4 more to get,
Yeah, exactly. But one of the things where I'm worried more about Tank than the other guys is because even though he's young, he's still older than all the other guys like Haney, Garcia, and all of them.
Yeah.
Like, so even though he, of course, has tons of time left and to have a lot more big fights, it's still like it's a bit worrying to see how like he might not have all the opportunities to fight the top of the top dogs, which everyone would love to see since Tank is also a big name in the sport.
It's super unfortunate. It kind of seems like wasted potential in a way because I mean we're seeing Tank. He's such a great talent, but he's not fighting these top level guys. He's not fighting the guys that people want him to see. Any undefeated guys or. He went up to 140 pounds, fought Mario Barrios in an impressive performance where, he stopped a much bigger guy. Mario Barrios was so much taller than him, but we saw in his last fight that he struggled with that kind of style that Isaac Cruz possessed. So, it's kind of tough to say where Tank will go if he'll be the next superstar in boxing, but the potential is 100% there.
Yeah.
He has the potential, he has the skills, he has the power. And it would definitely be interesting to see how he would fare against like different like top level opposition in lightweight, but I don't know if we're gonna get to see that, and it's super unfortunate.
Yeah, like a really interesting fight. I feel like obviously Garcia versus Tank would be a really cool fight to see. Two guys with explosive power and speed. But
Yeah.
another one that would be really interesting is Devin Haney versus Gervonta Davis, since it's two kind of different styles. Although
Yeah.
Tank is also like he's a very good technical fighter and he can fight technically as well. But yeah, it would just be interesting to see kind of Haney's outpointing style versus Tank maybe trying to go for the kill and just see how those two styles collage.
Yeah, definitely. It would be interesting, because Devin's more of like a passive fighter, but he likes to stay in the pocket, which would be scary against Tank, obviously, because he's a huge puncher.
Yeah, that would be
You know,
bad.
if he gets a flush shot landed to him, which maybe in the later rounds he'll start to slow, but Devin Haney does have freakish cardio, so he has really good cardio. Devin Haney, I feel like that's kind of like an underrated attribute of his. He can go many rounds. He can and he doesn't seem to get tired. He's still in the fight. He's still sometimes he'll when he's tired he'll put his hands low, which you never want to see, especially with while people are saying he has a questionable chin, which we don't really know. We haven't seen him get dropped at all, but we have seen him get rocked against Linares. So I don't think he has a bad chin necessarily. I mean, we haven't seen it, so you can't really say. But it will be interesting. Obviously, I think if Gervonta Davis lands a flush shot on Devin, it will be trouble for sure.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't end too well for Haney.
And he's also he's a good boxer, but he could also be technical. The commentators are saying, Gervonta Davis said he wanted to do MMA, which I heard that. I'm like, that's a bit interesting because he was fighting in like a kind of dirty way, similar to how Floyd Mayweather fights. He was such a good boxer.
Well, in the clinch, he has some tricks where some are a little bit questionable.
There's one point where he just rocked out his shoulder out of nowhere, and came out with a knee tap and
saw him go for the little Conor McGregor shoulder strike.
Yeah, and he was
which is funny.
He was doing it all. So I mean, it would be interesting to see him fight MMA. That would be crazy if that actually happened. I definitely
if that happened, that would
definitely don't see it happening, but. In this world, anything could happen at this point with how things have been going recently. On that note of MMA, of course, we have Dustin Poirier fighting Charles Oliveira in UFC 269, which is a super exciting fight. Super exciting for Dustin Poirier's career, Charles Oliveira's career. Is he really at this champion level, or did he just become champion because Khabib left? So it will be interesting to see how Charles Oliveira does against Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier, of course, is I'm pretty sure he's the favorite, right?
I'm pretty sure. I haven't checked too recently, but I'm assuming he's probably the favorite after coming off back-to-back huge wins over Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Dustin's a huge. He's a big time striker, but I feel like Charles Oliveira could definitely possess some things that threaten Dustin's game.
Yeah, well, Oliveira has a very diverse game, and his striking over the years has really developed as well. He has amazing technique.
Yeah, for
his
sure.
technique's great. He has amazing kicks and a variety of different strikes that could really cause some trouble for Dustin, as well as, of course, his submission game.
Jiu-jitsu, yeah.
Yeah,
all of that.
Insane.
So,
most submissions in UFC history.
I think Dustin Poirier was talking about moving up to welterweight after he wins this title, which that would be crazy. That would bring the welterweight to even on the next level of stacked. That division has all those guys, has the Usmans, the Covingtons, the Gilbert Burns, all those super talented guys, and then to bring Dustin Poirier into the picture in that division would be unreal. I mean, how do you think about between Dustin Poirier and Usman would go?
Well, yeah, first of all, Dustin is a giant. He's a huge lightweight. So first of all, I don't even know how he made featherweight.
Yeah.
He's a huge lightweight. So and he's talked about going up to welterweight many times. So it's definitely a possibility. Whether even if he wins this weekend at UFC 269, I don't see him obviously going to welterweight since he'll have the championship belt unless he goes for double champ status.
Yeah.
Against Usman. But if he loses, he might go up. And then him versus Usman is an interesting one. I see Usman winning that fight, as Usman's striking is, of course, developed tremendously, and his power is really to be reckoned with. And of course, his ground game is phenomenal. even though Dustin definitely has good ground game, which he showcased against Conor McGregor, and his ground and pound is definitely vicious. But Usman has the advantage there for sure, as his ground game's fantastic.
And also with the size, Dustin Poirier is a huge lightweight, but in welterweight, he'll still be big, but he won't be the biggest guy in the division. That's for sure. Usman's a huge welterweight. I don't he's like ripped
giant
in that division. I don't understand. Like I see pictures of him and I'm like, there's no way this guy could make 170 pounds.
He's huge.
Like that's unreal. Obviously, same with Dustin could be said in lightweight. He's huge for that division. So going up is definitely possible. So a fight with Usman would be unreal. I mean, if he wants to go for that champ status, which it's possible. I don't know if he'd do that right away, but I could see him doing it in the future if he stays dominant in the lightweight division. Maybe beats Justin Gaethje. Some defenses of the title. I don't know if he would be able to get past Islam Makhachev. That would be a crazy fight as well. But
yeah, also the thing for Dustin is at welterweight, it's not like there's only one interesting fight for him. Like for Usman, if that double champ status ever came about, but also against Colby Covington would be a huge fight as well, since they both have been talking back and forth at each other. Colby talking some trash like he usually does. That's definitely a good fight as well. Seeing Colby Covington come off that Usman fight is going to be very interesting to see, and if he's going to improve on which aspects of his game. Because especially if he wants to try to get that Usman trilogy, even though it was a very competitive fight and towards those last rounds, Covington did well. I think he needs that one more maybe upgrade in his game to win.
It's gonna be hard for Usman or for Colby to secure another title shot against Usman, especially because a trilogy. It's kind of a stretch when Usman's won those 2 rounds or those 2 fights between them. But if Colby can stay proving that he's the number 1 contender in that division, then that they're gonna have to give it to him.
If he's able to rack up a lot of wins, then they'll have to, especially if he doesn't lose. And that's why I feel like
and he's also he's also a big personality in the division.
Yeah, for sure.
He's a big talker. He brings a lot of eyes, and it would definitely be another interesting fight if they were to have a trilogy. Obviously, a lot of people would think Usman won because he won the first 2 fights, but if Colby proves that he's still at that top of the division, then I could see it happening once.
And that's
again.
right, especially now with Jorge Masvidal having to pull out against Leon Edwards. Like Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal would be such a good fight. It would be so good, especially with all the drama there of them being ex-teammates, best friends living together. And then just to see that all unfold with all the lead up to that, and then the fight, it would be really cool to see.
That would be crazy. And there was talk about that being on The Ultimate Fighter, of course.
Yeah, so, which would be an insane season.
Yeah,
so much drama there. And then obviously both guys coming off a loss to Usman, and both of them coming off with tough fights as well, where both of them got hurt multiple times, especially Masvidal getting knocked out.
He got pretty hurt. He got pretty hurt in that fight, I'd say.
He got laid out, unfortunately for him. But Usman is just too dominant there. I don't see anyone beating him except maybe a potential Khamzat Chimaev climbing the rings.
Potential superstar in the sport.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of superstars in the UFC. Obviously, we know Conor McGregor. He's the top guy for sure, without a doubt.
Probably will.
Israel Adesanya is making his way, though. There was a list of, I think, the biggest UFC pay-per-views, and I think Adesanya was on either 1 or 2 of those spots, which was really impressive.
Especially his fight with Jan Blachowicz, because, especially there's so much hype with him going to become a double champ. Unfortunately for him, he couldn't secure it, but it was a huge fight, and he's a big name as well. I feel like if he would have won that double champ status, his name would have gone so much bigger as well. Like there would have been a lot more hype, even though there already is.
Even now.
Yeah, there's tons.
Even now, still without it, Israel Adesanya, with how dominant he's been in the middleweight division, there's a lot of praise there, and there's a lot of fans that Israel Adesanya has. I'm one of them for sure, because he's such an exciting fighter. Obviously, an amazing kickboxer, great takedown defense, a very well-rounded fighter in the UFC, So I don't see him losing anytime soon in the middleweight division.
Yeah, me either. I don't like Robert Whitaker is the only one that I could see challenging him in this rematch coming up. But otherwise, if Izzy's able to beat him like he did in their first fight and just that dominantly, I don't see anyone that could.
Yeah, and speaking of other superstars, we got tons of other new superstars that are making their way into the division. Obviously, Sean O'Malley, Paddy Pimblett, people like that. Khamzat Chimaev, of course, he has so much hype behind him, and I want to talk about their personalities, their skills, and I also want to talk about the potential of these guys, how the UFC can market them to become superstars, become the next Conor McGregor.
Yeah. Well,
what do you think?
Personally, like, just while we're talking about Conor McGregor, I don't see with him, like, he was so special hype that I don't think anyone could replicate that. But some of these guys coming up, though, are, like, they have so much hype behind them, especially Khamzat Chimaev, who's just been dominating everyone in his path. Of course, fought his first ranked fighter in the Leech, and he was able to just destroy him, like took him down
in minutes, like mere minutes, and
just killed him.
He just dominated him, and I did the Leech, did he go out unconscious from that?
Yeah, he was out cold. It's just he's such a monster. So yeah, with that win against the Leech in such a dominating fashion, he's the hype he gained, especially with all of his fights beforehand on Fight Island and making so much buzz with his one punch KO and is just demolishing guys. He's definitely out there, like probably number one.
The thing that makes a superstar is a lot of it is also personality. Khamzat Chimaev's personality is crazy. He goes on Twitter, he goes on these absolute rampages where he just comes at everybody, like he goes for their necks.
Everybody, brother.
Like quite literally, like he just goes after everybody, and it's crazy. He definitely has a marketable personality, and the skills are for sure there. He has what it takes, as well as Paddy Pimblett. He definitely has the personality as well. And also the marketability goes for all three of these guys. Sean O'Malley, Paddy Pimblett, Khamzat Chimaev. I see them having a lot of potential. Coming out as superstars in the UFC. Sean O'Malley, of course, a great striker and a bantamweight fighter who's also going to be fighting on UFC 269.
Yeah, and with him, it's interesting since so far he hasn't fought a ranked fighter, but hopefully sometime soon hopefully with these performances, and then he'll finally end up fighting one, so we could really see where he's at, pretty much skill wise. But
that's kind of even his motto these days. He's fighting non-ranked. He's an unranked champ.
Yeah.
He's been using that as a marketing ploy. Obviously, he has a big fan base, a very big fan base. He has a podcast, a lot of different things going for Sean O'Malley. Even does Twitch, I'm pretty sure. So, he's a super big name, and I could see him being a very big deal in UFC, especially if he has the skills to become, a really highly notable guy in the skill department, maybe becoming a champ in the future. We'll see. But
something about he definitely has great striking skills with a huge diverse different moves that he can pull off and different strikes. But it's just the issue with that is the bantamweight division is so stacked in the UFC. There's so many like amazing fighters. It's probably the most stacked division right now, or maybe lightweight. Between the two, where you have Piotr Yan, you have Aljamain Sterling.
Also welterweight.
Yeah, also welterweight as well. But it's just there's so many. Yeah, there's so many stacked divisions. It's just crazy. So it's gonna be tough for Sean O'Malley and also Paddy Pimblett in the lightweight division, which, like we said, another stacked division. Him in his debut, he had a great debut. Managed to get the guy out of there in the first round, but. Yeah, he got caught with he got clipped in the first round as well, and it wasn't looking good for him in the beginning, but he managed to recover and then managed to take the guy out, and it was
and then he got on the mic and all the hype came towards him. Paddy Pimblett is seemingly gonna be a big star in the UFC. I mean, we'll see. There's a lot of hype between him.
Yeah, and another guy with a super cool personality and who just draws fans.
And also, he definitely got the look. He got that crazy hairstyle.
Look.
that Yeah. And that's also been memed on. you know, there's a lot of different stars and potential for the UFC. The potential is looking bright. The future is looking bright for the UFC, and I'm excited to see what happens between these guys and even more guys in the future that could have potential of becoming superstars.
Yeah,
But
it's really close.
on the note of Khamzat Chimaev, who do you think is going to be next for him? Because I mean, he has so many potential opponents, so many great opposition in the welterweight division. Obviously, such a stacked division.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
he's been so dominant recently. So what do you think is next for him?
Yeah, so Dana White's come on to say that a lot of these guys are like scared of Khamzat Chimaev and don't want to fight him. And then Khamzat's been calling out literally everyone you could think of in all divisions.
Dana's been giving Khamzat a lot of praise. More than you see him praise a lot of other guys.
Well, there's good reason
in the
for
UFC.
it. Since all the hype, so he's marketing and promoting him well. So, yeah.
And his skills, we've seen him just dominate these guys like it's nothing, and that's it's just crazy to see.
Yeah. And then one guy who's been calling out like a lot recently. Well, earlier we had Gilbert Burns, and there was some talk about Khamzat Chimaev versus Gilbert Burns, but now it doesn't seem that's gonna happen.
Doesn't seem that's gonna happen because I think didn't Gilbert Burns say that he's not a ranked contender, so that he didn't really.
Yeah,
or maybe not a highly ranked contender.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was saying like he'll definitely fight him soon, but he's just not that high enough ranked yet for him.
And a lot of fighters use that kind of as an excuse to not fight him. There's a lot of fighters. I'm not saying necessarily Gilbert Burns is, but
I don't think Gilbert is, since he's the type of guy that would fight anyone. I think, but there's such a dangerous fight against Khamzat Chimaev.
Yeah, anyone's gonna have a tough night with him.
And then the guy who's been calling out on social media Khamzat a lot, which is Neil Magny, which there was talks even earlier from before Khamzat fought the Leech, and in his last fight, of course, that he would might be going up against Neil Magny.
And that seems like a fight that would actually Neil Magny would actually take that fight. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these guys wouldn't be willing to make the walk against Khamzat Chimaev.
For him especially, there's not too much to lose and so much to gain, since for him he's not too far ahead in the rankings versus Khamzat, where Gilbert Burns more is like top 3 in the division, and Khamzat right now is
top 10,
top 15, top 10. So there's more to risk there. But for Neil Magny, there's not much really, because if he manages to win, then he gains all the hype from Khamzat, and then the UFC can market him as a big superstar as well. And even if he loses, then he'll still get respect probably from even fighting Khamzat.
I think Khamzat Chimaev has such a bright future and so much potential. With people in terms of who he can fight next, obviously, there's tons of different options. I mean, there was Nate Diaz at one point, but Dana White seemed to seemingly shut that down.
Yeah, and also it doesn't seem that Nate has gone on to say that he won't fight or doesn't want to fight him.
A rookie.
Yeah,
he's calling Khamzat Chimaev. Why would you guys offer me a rookie? I'm a veteran in this game. That's what Nate was kind of saying, which obviously a reason to not fight him, of course, but Nate Diaz doesn't exactly
for Nate, since he has
doesn't
one
exactly
fight
need
left.
that fight for his last fight in the contract. That'd just be doing him dirty, in my opinion.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to see, especially if Nate doesn't resign, I wouldn't like to see that be Nate's last fight in the UFC, because I just see Khamzat. It's a bad matchup for him, even though Nate has great jiu-jitsu. I just don't see how he would match up amazingly, but it would be a great fight nonetheless.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential for Khamzat Chimaev's opponents. And a lot of people call him out. A lot of people who he calls out on his own.
He's calling out everyone from any division.
He's been going any division, bro. He'll go after DC, Brock Lesnar,
Conor McGregor, everyone.
Conor McGregor,
even though nowadays it seems like Conor is like a middleweight, so it might make sense from how much
Conor
muscle he
McGregor's
gained.
been looking big, bro. He's been looking jacked.
Yeah, that injury really made him want to go up to heavyweight. Fight Francis Ngannou.
Yeah, that'd be an epic fight. Just imagine, bro.
We just see 5'9" Conor versus freaking Francis Ngannou. Legendary.
One day.
One day it'll happen.
One day. No, there's definitely a reality where Conor McGregor is facing Francis Ngannou for the heavyweight world title.
Yeah.
So, there are people who genuinely believe that Khamzat Chimaev can become the first 3-division world champion in the UFC. Which, I mean, right now, of course, that's like such a stretch to say because he still first has to conquer the welterweight division.
Yeah.
So, but the potential he has, especially in the way that he's able to, make weight all the time, and he's so big for a welterweight. So
we know he could for sure go to middleweight as he's had fights there, and I don't see why not. You can't go to light heavyweight. And the thing that's so interesting about him is like he's the first guy that like we've seen like with this much hype that's also willing to go to any lengths to fight whoever.
Yeah.
At any weight class, which is it's just so cool and just brings that added like potential to him of both hype and skill wise to see. First, like you said, of course, it's going to be very difficult for him in the welterweight division since so many great fighters there, and especially the champ, Kamaru
Usman has been so dominant in that division, and it just looks like nobody's going to beat him. But if there's anybody who has all the hype around him and all the noise behind him, it's Khamzat Chimaev. He's coming in there and he's making all the noise. He's making a buzz. So that could be a potential fight if Khamzat could get past a few ranked guys. And I think Dana White said maybe a few more fights for Khamzat and then we'll get Usman. But yeah, he'd first have to conquer that division, and that's a huge task in itself. Obviously, there's also middleweight and a light heavyweight that he'd have to conquer.
Like middleweight against Israel Adesanya, like that's a tough fight for him as well since Adesanya is such a great striker and just amazing, but
super skilled.
Also Khamzat with his takedowns could be really good. Even though at middleweight, Izzy has amazing takedown defense, especially at middleweight, and so that would be interesting to see how they pair. And at light heavyweight, also the new champ, Glover Teixeira versus Khamzat Chimaev. Those are all interesting fights in their own.
It's just crazy to think about, like those kind of fights, like Glover Teixeira versus Khamzat Chimaev. It's even crazier
that it could be a possibility as well somehow.
Yeah, and that's nuts to think about because I mean we've never seen a champ. That would be if he became that, bro. He'd easily become one of the biggest superstars in the UFC without a doubt. Like
definitely.
He's like that. Like if he conquered all 3 of those divisions and it looks like right now like he's on the path to come up in welterweight division and beat these guys. A lot of these people don't really want to fight him, and Dana White said it himself. So, it will be interesting. See if he could do it. It's a very large task, and it's way too hard to say if he can actually do it at this point. But it's interesting to speculate and to hypothesize, see a potential in Khamzat Chimaev becoming a 3-weight division world champ.
Yeah, and then one of course, the talked about opponents, Nate Diaz, who there was speculation that he would be fighting Jake Paul maybe after his UFC contract is up. Yeah. And then I wonder, that's an interesting fight and how it plays out.
That'd be such an interesting fight because of course Nate Diaz is striking is super elite. His boxing is amazing, and he said himself, I should be in the boxing ring, not the cage. Like he's a great boxer. And it'd be so interesting to see him against Jake Paul because we saw how Jake Paul did against Woodley the first time around. Not even the fact that that's happening again is unreal in itself. But we'll get to that in a bit. We saw how he did against Woodley, and he was able to outbox Woodley, and obviously got caught. I don't think Nate Diaz would be able to catch Jake Paul like Woodley did, of course, but. It would be an interesting fight. I definitely don't see Jake Paul stopping Nate Diaz. I mean, like
no way. I don't see it as well.
No
Since
chance. Nate Diaz is as tough as they come, man. He's tough as nails.
He's like a zombie. He just keeps coming forward.
Yeah, and I don't know if Nate would be able to stop Jake Paul. Maybe with the volume, maybe with the,
Maybe.
But it would be a tough fight. It's very hard to call. But, Nate Diaz does have 1 fight left on his contract. So, the potential of that fight is definitely there. And it really makes sense for that to happen because, Nate Diaz has said he wanted to box for so long. And if he gets if his contract with the UFC expires, then, it's definitely possible because Jake Paul and him have had history. You know, they've had back and forth since even like the Nate Robinson fight. You know, so
And I kind of want to talk about like also the magnitude of that fight and how it kind of compares to Jake Paul's previous fights.
huge mega fight.
Yeah, I definitely see it being, well, for sure the biggest fight to date for Jake Paul. Like the numbers aren't too clear about like the Ben Askren fight and Nate Robinson. I'm pretty sure the first Tyron Woodley fight did around like 500K buys. This would probably get like, who knows, probably
this would do
800K to a million,
well.
Maybe.
Yeah,
it might be a stretch, maybe. It depends.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say because, you know, Jake Paul in his own right has become such a big star, but Nate Diaz is one of the biggest stars in the UFC. You know, such a huge draw. The Diaz brothers are, you know, they're as tough as they come, and they're as popular as they come. You know, they're super popular, super famous, and you know they have the skills to back it up. It would be so interesting to see that fight against Jake Paul, and it would be such a tough fight to call because, you know, Diaz, of course, such a great technical striker, but Jake Paul has been boxing for a couple of years now. You know, he has you know the decent skills for a couple of years in, and he's only been focusing on boxing. That's the difference. You know, Nate obviously hasn't only been focusing on boxing throughout his UFC career, but he has boxed. You know, he does boxing, so it's hard to say.
And just it would be interesting to see how the volume of Nate matches up against Jake's style, since it could be possible that Nate could maybe even like break Jake down, or maybe Jake is able to like counter that out. So it's an interesting matchup just for
and think about the back and forth of potential of that fight. You know, what they'd say, how they'd build it up. That would like just be such a crazy fight, and the trash talk would be nuts. And you know, a lot of people don't like what Jake Paul's doing in boxing, but in my opinion, it's good for the sport. And I think a fight with Nate Diaz would be huge, and would if he was able to get past Nate Diaz, you know, that really show like, and you know, maybe he's not fighting Tommy Fury, who's a legitimate boxer, I guess you could say, with 7-0, but Nate Diaz is such a good boxer, especially in the UFC, and he's not like well past his prime, like, you know, he hasn't. Obviously, he's not in his prime.
Yeah, he has a lot of mileage, you know, but he's definitely.
Yeah, but he's not 40 years old. He's not as old as Tyron Woodley. You know, he's not like retired as well. So I mean, Tyron Woodley wasn't retired necessarily, but he did just get cut from the UFC.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting.
And I feel like depending on how they market this fight, it could be like really big. Like if they do it right, like this fight could be huge. Especially like if they like bringing in how Jake has kind of done with the Woodley fight and the Ben fight, kind of bringing in the MMA world as well, and if they can leverage that and, when it's against Nate as well, that could make it even bigger.
And Jake Paul's been riling up the MMA community for a while now. He's been, you know, making so much noise in that scene, especially when he started when he was fighting Ben Askren. He beat him, of course, started chirping to everyone you could think of. Obviously, when he beat Woodley as well, you know, he calls out all these guys in the UFC.
Yeah, and also involving, you know, Dana White into the mix.
Yeah, he's called out everyone from Conor McGregor to Michael Bisping to Jorge Masvidal, Nate Diaz, all these guys, and it would be interesting to see how Jake Paul would really do against, you know, one of these guys that everyone in the MMA world would for sure think would beat Jake Paul. But you know, Jake Paul still has a lot to prove in terms of his boxing ability. You know, I think a lot might get answered in the second Woodley fight because, you know, he's already been shown to hurt. Woodley's already been shown to hurt Jake Paul. So if he could, you know, manage to beat Woodley decisively in this one, maybe even stop him, that would show, you know, a huge progress for him, and you know that'd be very good for him in terms of his boxing career.
Yeah, and then on obviously Jake Paul's on the note of that, just recently Tommy Fury pulling out of the Jake Paul fight on December the 18th, and Tyron Woodley.
So unfortunate to see, man. Yeah. It was like, cause that was so hype. Obviously, Tyron Woodley has replaced Tommy Fury for that rematch, which, I mean, that's crazy. Tyron Woodley's taking that on 12 days notice, and Jake Paul's getting in there still, even when it's not against Tommy Fury. Like, that is crazy that Tommy Fury backed out of that fight. There was so much advertising, so much marketing, so much, you know, going into that fight, so many stakes, and to see it just get canceled in a blink of an eye, it's so unfortunate. And obviously the Furies would have such a great pull, but it will be interesting to see how it will do. The fight will do now that Woodley is in place of Tommy. I think it will still do pretty well. Because Woodley's still going to be a big draw, and Jake Paul fighting is also going to be a big draw. So, their first fight was big. I think their second fight will be big, but I don't think it will be as big. Guess we'll have to see.
Yeah.
So on that note, what do you think of the people who say Tommy Fury is scared to fight Jake Paul in a boxing match? He obviously pulled out of the fight due to an injury. I think he said he had a chest infection and a broken ribs. But a lot of people say that's just an excuse. He wanted a way out, and there's been a hypocrisy in terms of Tyson Fury saying that Tommy Fury could beat him with a broken rib and a flu and this and that.
Yeah. So ironic.
So what do you yeah? So what do you think of the people who say that Tommy Fury's scared? Do you think there's any validity to that, or do you think that it's just he's actually injured?
I don't think he's scared. He even he showed proof on video of his broken rib and everything. I think it's more just really unfortunate. Also, maybe the moment, the big occasion might have gone to Tommy a little bit, but I don't see that being enough to make him pull out. I just think it's super unfortunate.
The pressure and the big stage.
It's super unfortunate.
I feel like that could have made him kind of complacent, or not complacent, but kind of overtrained maybe. Kind of get to him and he'd sink in camp. All this pressure, all this, and he goes so hard that then he develops these rib injuries and chest infections. I don't know if it's from training, but still. So it's interesting to see that. But
one thing I don't get though, because he said that he knew about all the stuff going on with him a lot earlier, weeks earlier. I'm pretty sure he said.
Yeah. He said, I think he said 2 weeks into his camp, he knew that he was starting to have problems.
Yeah, we didn't even hear any reports of it anyway. So the fact that he kind of waited 2 weeks before the fight it's a bit weird. But in the overall scheme of it, I don't think he was scared. It's just more it really sucks.
Yeah,
but
it's just unfortunate.
To be fair, Tyron Woodley coming in as a replacement for Tommy, it's still interesting. It's an interesting fight, and especially because Tyron rocked Jake heavily, pretty much a knockdown.
He definitely has that power, and Tyron definitely had what it took to maybe beat Jake Paul, but he definitely had what it took, to do more at least. He could have thrown more, he could have done more, and everyone who watched that fight could definitely see that. So a rematch between them is definitely still interesting. It's not like it's a dead fight now, but it's definitely interesting. Obviously still involving the MMA world back into it, but 12 days notice, or maybe 15 days notice, or whatever it was that Tommy Fury gave, it sucks to see, but it just doesn't make sense why he would wait all up until that point. If he knew that he had injuries, if he knew that he wasn't going to be fit to fight, why did we go through this whole process of getting all the way through, and then camp's over and I can't fight. I feel like he should have done that. I feel like he should have done that earlier, especially if he knew 2 weeks into camp. I get it. He said that he wanted to. He said he wanted to. He thought he'd get better. He thought it would develop, but you can't take risks like that when you're going into the biggest fight of your life. If something's not right, just I get it's the biggest payday. He doesn't want to fumble it as well, but he just did. So
Tommy fumbles.
Tommy fumbles representing.
Yeah,
it's interesting. I don't think he's scared either, but I just think it's a very unfortunate turn of events. I think Jake Paul is now gonna get, if he wasn't able to beat Tommy Fury before, I think he's definitely gonna get an edge over him, especially after fighting Tyron Woodley, because getting those another 8 rounds of experience, if it even goes that far, is definitely going to be beneficial for him. Another fight under the lights, another fight under pressure. And he was supposed to fight Tommy. He went through this whole process of fighting Tommy. And I feel like the experience Jake gains could even leverage, if that fight does happen in the future, it could now benefit Jake if it didn't already.
Yeah, and another reason why I think this fight with Tyron replacing Tommy is so interesting, especially since the rematch, is because both guys probably are watching that fight back and in camp, or at least the brief camp Tyron's gonna have, and both Jake for this new opponent they're both gonna make their own adjustments, and especially with Tyrone, how he didn't throw a lot the frozen one. He's got to make those adjustments, especially if he's hurt Jake like how he did in the last fight. He's got to capitalize on those moments and make the best out of those and try to secure the finish. And then also for Jake, he one thing about him in that fight, he gassed out pretty early into the fight, which also something that could be attributed to is him being on the back foot the whole time and having to circle around the ring, and he's gonna have to try to make adjustments to make sure.
I feel like Jake tiring out could have been more. I feel like it could have been more based off of cardio management rather than actual cardio capacity. You know, he didn't really manage his cardio well when he's moving across the ring every 12 seconds. You know, he's on the other side of the ring, while Tyron Woodley's sitting in the middle of the ring, just controlling and dictating everything. You know, so the cardio management on Jake's part definitely wasn't good. But I definitely want to go more in depth into this fight between Tyron Woodley and Jake Paul in our next podcast. So be sure to tune into that. But on the note of Jake Paul and kind of like the YouTube boxing world, there's been this event that has been announced between from Anisan Gibb and Deji, which is the brother of KSI, of course. So there's been an announcement that they will be fighting. I mean, there wasn't really an announcement. There was supposed to be.
Yeah, I think Gibb said that he's going to have the full fight announcement on this upcoming Friday. He said that, well, first he put out a post how there was like a contract dispute, and then a video will be posted on Friday.
And then weird.
And then he changed it to just saying fight announcement on Friday, which is, it's weird. So hopefully they got that resolved. And then with Deji obviously coming back from his loss to Vinny Hacker, which everyone thought Deji was going to win that, but he didn't turn up really in the right shape and everything.
Definitely not.
Definitely not, but hopefully third time's a charm, I guess.
It just didn't seem like he took it seriously, but now he just put out a video, of course, called Redemption, which, you know, he kind of showcased, you know, that he wants to redeem himself. Like now he's, you know,
like you said, the last chance. It's been 2 times,
so it's kind of hard to like redeem himself or you know, kind of like, you know, tell us that, you know, kind of prove to us that he's actually gonna take it seriously, because, you know, he's already failed us twice. So, you know, it's gonna be hard to try to trust and believe in the process, but I think we got it, because, you know, that last loss was really bad, especially because at the caliber of opponent that he lost to. No offense to Vinny Hacker, but, you know, Deji had so much more training and so much, you know, more assets to beat Vinny Hacker than he showed, and, you know, he just didn't take the fight seriously. He didn't train enough, and super unfortunate. But I think Deji's definitely gonna try harder in his return. He's definitely gonna take it much seriously.
Well, he has to.
I'm pretty sure.
Pretty much game over.
He has to, bro.
Like, there's no more times you can say redemption. Yeah. Really, like, it'll be over.
And no one's really gonna care anymore after this fight. But, you know, the UK has his back for one last time, and even it's gonna be interesting. Obviously Gibb also fighting on the same card, potentially.
Hopefully Deji doesn't become the Sank again and finally becomes the Tank.
Yeah, the Sank.
And hopefully he becomes the Tank.
Yeah, hopefully he turns up and he's the Tank and not the Sank, but we'll have to see. Gibb had a great performance in his last fight against Taylor Holder, which that's an interesting that was an interesting fight. Obviously they gave it a draw, which
the most rigged thing ever.
Yeah, definitely. But
that event, like, the way it turned out was so disappointing.
And how they didn't pay their fighters, and, you know, all that drama that was happening was super weird. But
and then it's gonna be interesting.
Deji, ironically, Gibb and Deji were the only ones who got paid. So
and
they're the ones with the announcement. I mean, it'll be interesting. People, there are rumors that KSI is going to return on the same event. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, I don't see it. He would have probably announced it.
Yeah, he would have announced it himself, and also it doesn't really make sense for him to get on a YouTube boxing card.
Because he's doing all the music and everything with his tours, which I don't know if they're still going on right now, also, but he's been super busy. But it's going to be cool to see Gibb back in there now. And depending on who the opponent is, it could be a really interesting fight between whoever he is facing. And Who
I
knows
feel
where he
I
wants
feel
to
like
go from there? Maybe.
I feel like Gibb might want to fight like an Austin McBroom, and then maybe if Austin McBroom was able to get past Gibb, then he'd fight a KSI. That would kind of make sense in my world, or in my opinion. But I don't know if Austin would be able to get past Gibb, because Gibb's tough as they come, and he's proven that he trains, and it would be a very hard matchup for Austin to take care of Gibb. But that's definitely a fight that's possible in the YouTube boxing world. Obviously, Austin is had a lot of drama with that whole social gloves thing. That was his event, and he's his name is under all of that drama and all of that.
Yeah, it's a real stain on his name, especially because now I feel like if he tried to get back into the scene of YouTube boxing, there's always gonna be some stigma attached to him.
Yeah.
Just because of how that ended up and how that went, but he had a good performance against Bryce Hall. Obviously, Bryce Hall not the greatest of fighters.
We got Bryce Hall, but
yeah, but it's still a good performance. But depending on if he fights Gibb and if he managed to get past Gibb, but I don't think he would. I think it favors Gibb. But if he were to get past Gibb, then we could possibly see KSI fight Austin, and KSI finally making his return.
Yeah.
And then who knows from there? Maybe even Jake Paul down the line if KSI won.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't see that, but
yeah, I personally I don't think Jake Paul makes sense for any YouTuber at this point, because he's moved on to real fighters and potentially real boxers if that Tommy Fury fight does come back.
Yeah.
Which, I mean,
but the cool thing, the interesting thing is that that fight between Jake and KSI is in some way always there.
Yeah, of course.
Just how much hype there is in the YouTube world.
It still makes sense in terms of money, but in terms of for KSI, it doesn't really make sense in my opinion, because why does he need to get in there with Jake Paul at this point? He doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't really make sense, and it doesn't really seem like it will happen. He hasn't had any boxing matches recently, so. It doesn't really make sense.
If he fought anyone, I could see Austin making sense, and I think that would be a good fight.
I think he said he wanted to fight Austin, which it would be interesting. There was also this leak I think it was called Showstar Boxing, that had
yeah, right.
Yeah,
that's gonna be the promotion for them.
That had a poster of UK versus USA, but then they kind of got rid of the banner. So it will be interesting. It will be interesting to see if that's the promotion and how they'll handle that. A UK versus USA YouTube boxing event would definitely be cool to see, and we definitely cover it here on the podcast. So, I mean, yeah, we'll see what happens in terms of that. In terms of if that gets announced, I've also been thinking, KSI has his own boxing promotion now. I'm pretty sure a few months ago, I'm pretty sure it was when the original Social Gloves event was taking place that he announced his own boxing promotion. So we haven't seen that since then. I think that was in June, so already half a year ago. We haven't really seen anything to do with that. So
someone soon there's gonna be something to do with that, whether with him or maybe other fighters. Who knows,
other celebrities. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Maybe they put on a YouTube boxing event of their own. In terms
maybe we'll see promoter KSI in action.
Yeah, I mean we got promoter Jake Paul kind of at this point with Amanda Serrano and Most Valuable Promotions. So who knows at this point. But this has been such a great podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for thank you all for listening to the podcast. Be sure to subscribe and like the video if you're on YouTube. If you're on Spotify, be sure to save the podcast. And that's pretty much it from us. Hope you guys enjoyed. And that's it.